Morning, Tom. How are you?
Morning, Kieran. I'm great, thank you.
So I suppose tell us about how and where you first met Bryan Ferry.
Well, I met Bryan originally at university. We became friends because I was studying at the School of Architecture, and the next door building on the quadrangle was a School of Fine Art. And I suppose Bryan was interested in all the architecture guys because we were an interesting bunch of people. A lot of us ex-public school, a lot of us girls, and the fine art department were fascinating because they had some really interesting students there who'd been very carefully chosen by Richard Hamilton. Richard Hamilton was the professor, enormously influential artist, and we sort of got together quite a lot. And I suppose I was always useful because I didn't drink, and I still don't really, and I always had a car, and if anyone ever wanted to go to a party, I was designated driver, and that suited me absolutely fine.
And it made you a popular guy.
Very popular.
So presumably you struck up a friendship with Bryan?
I did. I struck up a good friendship with Bryan. I went to lunch at his parents' house in Washington one day for a Sunday lunch, which was fabulous. Got to know his parents very well and knew them right through the end of their lives. They were good times.
And I suppose over the time your families have grown up together being mates for the last,
yes, in fact,
50 years?
My children and his children are actually friends to some extent too as well, which is great.
So tell us about how the paintings came. So behind we're looking at large abstract. So how did that come about?
I thought the paintings that were coming out of the fine art department at the time were superb, and I was training to be a modern architect. We did modern in those days, it was the only acceptable style. So my favourite building in London is still, I'm sorry to admit, the National Theatre, because that's the way I was trained. Similarly, the hard edge style of painting was what came out of the fine art department. You probably had no choice, I suspect, because that was what Richard Hamilton was doing, and everyone was encouraged the same way. And Bryan Ferry did it extremely well. So the situation occurred that he decided that he had to buy this 1955 Studebaker, which was an absolutely beautiful car, but I realised it was going to be pretty slow because it had the awful L-head 6-cylinder engine, which gave about 100 brake horsepower. But in style, it was incomparable. And parked outside his flat in Islington Terrace, it was just absolutely perfect, deeply moving, incredible.
So had he already seen the car, or did he search out the Studebaker? Or
someone was trying pretty hard to sell him the Studebaker, and they sort of left it there for him to buy if he wanted it. They'd take it away if he didn't, and he was absolutely desperate to find some money to buy the car. And in those days, I was in the music business in that I was running a mobile discotheque, in which I carried around a whole selection of records and a couple of amplifiers and some lightweight polystyrene polyplanar speakers, which were incredibly effective, unheard of now. And actually, in those days, I was never short of cash. I just had money. Every time I did another disco, another pocket full of money turned up. And when he wanted to buy the car, he said, would I buy some pictures from him? He didn't want to borrow money, but he wanted cash, so I agreed to buy these 3 pictures.
So did you, because I know one of them was in an exhibition and 2 weren't, and one nearly was. So did you buy them before or after the exhibition?
To be honest, I don't remember, but
right,
I think it was, I'm pretty sure it was after the exhibition. It must have been after the exhibition.
Yes, because it says no on the back of one of them, doesn't it? Yeah.
Well, I was well aware of what they were and the fact they had been exhibited, and I just thought they were absolutely beautiful. And I love beautiful things, I suppose, and had to have. And
I'm guessing because they're student pieces, that's why they're not signed, because I remember my A-level pieces, I had to black out my signature, I had to paint over it, and then I subsequently repainted it, I guess.
I suppose that's true. I don't really know, but I think that's true. But they do all have identification as Bryan Ferry on the back.
So this one's large abstract. Technically, these have only seen the light of day for about 3 years out of 50?
Well, maybe 5 or 10.
Yeah.
Yes, it was some time before I got married. And we moved down here, but yes, that's true.
so hence they're in such good condition.
So these were hidden in the roof of my old chapel, which was my business premises down the road from here. This is Belt, and really my favourite of the pictures. The first time I saw it, I thought it was superb. It was perhaps slightly revolutionary with the use of the silver metallic paint, and maybe that was why it got a rejection from the exhibition, as indicated on the back, with the in struck out and out substituted. But this picture, I have to say, has always been in my house, our house, on display, because it's just beautiful. Never been put away. I'm afraid this one has been on display always.
So
every party and every event, there it is.
So this one's on board, isn't it?
This is on hardboard, masonite, the Americans call it, on a wooden stretcher, and beautiful, beautiful picture.
So would Bryan have done the frames, made the frames himself in those days? Was that how you would done it?
Well, they did have technicians in the fine art department, but I imagine he might just as well have done it himself.
So this painting, I particularly love the colours. This is called Abstract.
It is, and it's another in the hard edge style, acrylic, I presume, on canvas, but interesting because it's used a lot of drafting or masking tape to do the composition. And of course that whole masking tape thing then went on into being big in custom car painting as well. And I am really a car person.
Yeah. So in terms of this, I suppose what was coming out of the Hamilton School of Art, I suppose, as it was at the time. So was there many pieces that were similar to Bryan's?
I imagine there were, but to be honest, I don't recall. But I mean, yes, there were. There was a lot of other hard edge work going on around. I've got another one as well by Mark Lancaster, which is of similar technique.
So he was teaching, I suppose, so therefore, I suppose...
Whether Mark was a teaching assistant or whatever, I don't know. But the whole thing was the most marvellous social group to be in. And the high point of every day was lunch in the upper refectory. Just across the quadrangle, there was a new refectory had been built. There was a lower basement refectory where everyone got chicken and chips, or sausage and chips, and beans with everything, and lashings of free brown sauce. Then upstairs we had the upper refectory, which tended to be eaten in with the professors, but actually any student could go in there if he could afford it. And in fact, they did a very affordable salad. So we tended to have 6 or 10 of us round a table very often. And on many occasions I've sat next to Richard Hamilton or close to him, hearing him hold forth in awe, and with the right sort of comments coming from all my friends. We called ourselves the Jet Set.
Very cool. Excellent. So this particular painting, was this one of the ones that was in? I can't remember.
I think this was in, yes.
Brilliant. And then this will lead us on, I guess, to in a minute we'll talk about the piece of photography that was one of the things for the exhibition.
Well, that's right. I mean, there were other exhibitions, not just this one, but there was something about this exhibition down at Durham that became a very, very big event. And I drove people down there a number of times, and it was just somewhere, it was the place to be.
So as we're talking about this from, I suppose, from an artwork point of view, but also, I suppose it does circumnavigate this Studebaker. Did you ever drive the Studebaker?
I never drove the Studebaker, no. Actually, I was probably never insured to drive it, and I've always been fanatical about keeping my insurance correct and not getting nicked. And so I wouldn't have driven it.
But presumably you went in it?
I did go in it, but I mean, it was painfully slow, and he was slightly frightened of driving it, I think. As I recall, it had a column gear shift just for a start. I'd love to find that car again.
I suspect it's dead. It's not on the DVLA anymore, so could be in a barn somewhere.
Believe me, it still exists.
Really?
Well, something that big, with a strong chassis and fairly well made, never ever gets crushed. Someone saves it. I'm a great believer in such things, and I've saved a few cars which were thought to not exist anymore.
Tell us about this, which is obviously the iconic picture of Bryan and the Studebaker.
Yes, Bryan absolutely knew how to do it right. He was and is the supreme self-publicist. Very subtle, very cool. And this was based on a picture by Jane McNulty, who I think was studying photography at Newcastle at the time. Remember her as a unattainably wonderful girl, very beautiful, short black hair, Mary Quant style. She was one of those style icons as well, and Bryan always was very good with those. She took this photograph and also a front view with Bryan leaning slightly on the car. And he then, I think, processed it into a screen and made a screen print for an advertisement for his show at Durham.
Which I would guess would be one of the paintings that we see behind us, would have been in that exhibition, I guess.
I think yes, it was, yes. Yeah. This is the poster for Bryan at the exhibition. It wasn't the exhibition poster, it was Bryan's own exhibition there.
So hang on, let's just rewind a little bit. So there was an official exhibition poster, but Bryan had his own done.
I suspect that's what happened, but it was a heck of a long time ago and I don't remember.
That's very, very cool.
Yes.
That is exquisitely cool. So in terms of rarity of that, I guess, is it a lithograph or is it a screen print?
It's a screen print.
So
two colour, green and pink for the lettering.
Right. Can't be many more than apart from the ones that were put on walls in the university.
Well, I never throw anything away, but I imagine that Bryan's got one, and I can't think of who else might.
Wow. One of two.
Yes. But whether he actually did it or whether he persuaded one of his friends in the screen printing department to do it, I don't know.